Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever looked around at your life and just felt this sudden, completely overwhelming wave of being totally lost, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to unpack the deep psychology behind that exact feeling today. So let's just dive right in. It usually starts with this quiet, super uncomfortable question creeping into the back of your mind. Am I falling behind? You log online or you catch up with some old friends, and suddenly it just seems like literally everyone else has it all figured out. You've got that one peer from college who's already crushing it in their career. Somebody else is constantly traveling the globe, living their best life. Another friend is getting married, buying a house, or making serious money. And then, well, there's you. Maybe you're studying, working a job you're not sure about, constantly changing your plans, or just desperately trying to figure out what you actually want out of life. It's so easy to wonder, wait, shouldn't I have figured this all out by now? Section 1. Why you feel so lost. Here's the honest truth. This feeling of being totally directionless, it is absolutely not a personal failure. Actually, it's a highly recognized, deeply studied psychological phase. Experts call this emerging adulthood. Seriously, psychologists have spent decades studying this exact, incredibly specific window of time. It's literally defined by deep identity exploration, intense uncertainty, and rapidly changing possibilities. You are essentially in the laboratory phase of your own life right now, just experimenting and trying to figure out what kind of adult you actually want to become. So take a breath. You're not failing, you are developing. Now, to understand why this shift feels so jarring, we've got to look at the massive contrast between childhood and adulthood. Just think about your childhood for a second. Your life was incredibly structured, right? You went to middle school, then high school, maybe college, then graduation. Boom, boom, boom. There was always a clear, totally predictable next step laid out for you. But suddenly, your 20s hit, and that comfortable, safe little roadmap, it completely disappears. Nobody gives you a timetable anymore. Nobody's there to tell you when you should fall in love, what career is going to make you happy, or when you magically need to be financially successful. Instead, you're just handed a completely blank slate. Which brings us to Section 2, the paradox of endless choice. Now, having a blank slate sounds incredibly freeing in theory, right? But it's actually the root cause of so much of our anxiety. It's a classic trap called the paradox of choice. See, in our 20s, we are constantly bombarded by massive life choices. Should I move to a new country? Should I go back to school and get a doctorate? Should I ditch my safe corporate job and just go traveling? We literally have hundreds of possible paths. But here's the kicker. Instead of making us feel free, this absolute abundance of options completely paralyzes us. We freeze up because every single decision carries this terrifying weight. We're constantly asking ourselves, oh man, what if I choose wrong? To show you just how deeply wired this is in human psychology, let's talk about the famous Stanford Jam experiment. So researchers set up a little stall at a local farmer's market. On day 1 of the experiment, they offered customers 27 different flavors of jam to sample and buy. 27! That's a whole lot of options to choose from, right? But then, on day 2, the researchers totally changed the setup. Instead of that overwhelming spread of 27 choices, they drastically reduced the display. They only offered 5 jams to the customers. And the results were wild. When the researchers analyzed the sales, they saw a massive 300% jump in purchases on the day they only offered 5 jams. 300%! This perfectly proves that as human beings, we actually do not want as many choices as we think we do. When we have fewer options, we are vastly more likely to actually take action. So when you apply this to your 20s, a decade where you literally have infinite career and lifestyle options laid out in front of you, it completely makes sense why you feel paralyzed. The sheer volume of choices is exactly what's making you less likely to act. Moving on to Section 3, the illusion of being behind. Because it's not just the choices themselves that paralyze us, it's how modern society actively amplifies our fear of making the wrong ones. I mean, you open social media and what's the first thing you see? The highlight reel. It's all new jobs, exotic travel, perfect marriages, but what you definitely don't see is the hidden reality behind all that. You are making a massive psychological mistake if you compare your full, messy, day-to-day reality with someone else's heavily curated, highly filtered best moments. You see the massive success, sure, but you don't see the unseen failures. You don't see the crippling uncertainty that came right before it, or the years of hidden grinding work that went into getting there. Seriously, the next time you think everyone is miles ahead of you, remind yourself, you only know what they have specifically chosen to show you. This right here is why comparison is so incredibly dangerous. Let's look at two totally different people, person A and person B. Person A hits all those massive societal milestones super early. They land their dream career at 22, they're married by 25, but then you have person B who has a totally different trajectory. They're changing directions, struggling financially early on, and maybe they don't find their partner until they're in their 30s. So who is actually ahead? Well, the truth is, there is no objective answer. Life is not a single race with one fixed finish line. You absolutely cannot, under any circumstances, treat someone else's timeline as a deadline for your own life. That brings us to Section 4, redefining your quarter-life crisis. There is this enormous, honestly toxic pressure that your 20s are supposed to be the absolute best years of your life. Like you're somehow supposed to simultaneously build a booming career, travel the world, find your absolute soulmate, get into perfect physical shape, and make tons of money all before hitting 30. Let's be real, you aren't meant to live 5 different lives at once. Instead, I want you to listen to this profound reframe from creator and entrepreneur Ali Abdaal. He says, a lack of direction isn't a failure, it means an abundance of opportunity. Think about that. If you're feeling uncertain, disconnected, or just questioning the entire point of it all, what we traditionally call a quarter-life crisis, it doesn't mean you're broken, not at all. It just means you are finally in an environment where you are asking better questions. You aren't blindly following the path you were handed at birth anymore. You're actually evaluating if it's even your path to begin with. Section 5, designing your average Monday. So we clearly need a framework for making decisions when we finally step off that traditional, highly structured path. Ali Abdaal actually shared this incredibly impactful piece of advice he received. This was back when he was debating whether to leave his totally secure, comfortable 9-to-5 job to risk it all on podcasting, which is obviously a highly unconventional path. A friend told him to stop obsessing over exactly what milestones he wanted to hit by age 50. Instead, they told him, just imagine how you want your life to feel on an average Monday afternoon. That is the absolute key right there. Focus on the feeling. When Ali did this, his goals completely shifted. They weren't about reaching a specific subscriber count or some magical income bracket anymore. His goals became entirely emotional and experiential. He wanted things like living in a vibrant city, hosting casual dinners with friends and interesting acquaintances, sharing stories with a partner at the end of an amazing day, and ultimately just feeling loved and happy. Realizing that multiple completely different career paths can get you to those exact same feelings is so incredibly liberating. It completely takes the pressure off of having to find that one single perfect 10-year plan. And finally, Section 6, you are still becoming. Look, if you're feeling super confused right now, it's highly likely it's simply because you are standing in that very uncomfortable space between the person you used to be and the person you are actively becoming. We spend so much time endlessly planning, just waiting around for some magical moment of clarity where our entire life's purpose is suddenly revealed to us. But here is the secret. Clarity does not come before action. It comes because of action. You cannot just sit in a room and think your way into knowing yourself. You literally have to live your way into knowing yourself. So, do yourself a favor and stop asking, what am I going to do with my entire life? Just ask, what is the next thing worth doing? You just have to start. Go ahead and try the course, learn the new skill, apply for that random opportunity, start the project, and most importantly, you have to allow yourself to change direction when you learn something new along the way. You might outgrow old friendships. You might lose interest in passions you used to love. You might start something, completely stop it, and then start all over again. And yeah, it might feel like you are moving backwards sometimes, but trust me, starting over is often the very first honest step forward. I want you to remember this final, incredibly empowering takeaway. Your 20s are not a performance. You absolutely do not need to spend an entire decade of your life trying to look successful to people online who, let's be honest, aren't even really paying attention anyway. True success is not about appearing ahead of schedule. It's about building a life that actually feels deeply meaningful to you, behind closed doors. Your 20s don't need to be perfect. They just need to be yours. Before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. What feels most confusing about your 20s right now? Really think about it, and please jump into the comments and share your experiences. Let's spark a real community conversation about this, because as we've seen today, you are absolutely not alone in feeling this way. You're not late, you're just becoming. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.